If you're part of the Honest and Open Conversations community, thank you for your support. It means a great deal to me. Now, on to today's podcast. Whether you love President Trump or you can't stand the sight of him, here's the truth nobody wants to admit. He matters, even if you hate him. Why? Because President Trump isn't just a politician. He's a mirror. President Trump exposed how fragile our so-called trusted institutions have become due to the corruption by the media, the bureaucracy, the security apparatus, and the political class. He showed that when an outsider threatens the system will use every tool it has to smear, censor, investigate, and prosecute to protect itself. President Trump dragged sovereignty back into the center of politics. Borders, energy independence, manufacturing, and fair alliances built on reciprocity. And he proved that America first doesn't mean America alone. It means a stronger America can lead a stronger West. Love him or hate him, Trump forced a reckoning. And that reckoning isn't staying in America. It's coming for everyone. It's coming for every Western nation, including us here in Australia. President Trump forced conversations about corruption, about borders, about energy, about family, and about freedom. Donald Trump's presidency, survival, and his movement are already reshaping the world we live in. And this isn't theoretical. It's already having consequences and showing up in global power structures. Let me give you an example. There is a real possibility that the military alliance of NATO is collapsing. Why? Because of tribal totalitarian collectivists, also known as the progressive leadership of Western Europe, Canada, and here in Australia, which support an ideology that is destructive and fundamentally incompatible with a constitutional democracy or a republic. I would argue that there are only two political ideologies truly compatible with a constitutional democracy or republic. The first is true conservatism, which simply means conserving what has proven to work. Not nostalgia, not stagnation, but the humility to recognize that institutions, traditions, and systems that survive generations do so for a reason. The second is traditional liberalism, the belief that individuals are free to live their lives as they choose, so long as they don't harm others. Individual liberty, personal responsibility, that is the foundation of every successful free society. And when those principles are abandoned, what replaces them is not compassion, it's control. So no, you can't blame President Trump for any decline in NATO. He isn't the one destroying Western civilization. He's the one trying to defend it. And that fight doesn't stop at America's borders. President Trump is doing exactly what leaders are supposed to do. He's protecting the American people, the Republic, and what's left of Western civilization from enemies, foreign and domestic, who advance the destructive ideology of tribal totalitarian collectivism. If you live in Australia like I do, you better pay attention, because what's happening in Western Europe, Canada, and the United States always lands here. And that means Australians need to act before it's too late. If we don't make changes now, this country will be irreparably damaged. Let's be honest, there are bad people in positions of power. They are rapidly stripping away the rights we thought we had. Australia and the United States have been the shining lights of Western civilization. Australia and America forged a friendship in blood. Throughout the 1900s, arguably, no country on earth is more intertwined with the United States than Australia. We've fought alongside America in every major conflict since Federation. World War I, World War II, especially in the Pacific, Korea, Vietnam, and the Middle East. We've bled together under an unspoken pact. When the free world needs defending, we show up and we kick ass. This may have been most evident in Vietnam, when our Aussie SAS and the American Navy SEALs work side by side, arguably one of the most formidable military partnerships the world has ever seen. So let me put this plainly. Apart from electing our own Prime Minister, no foreign vote matters more to Australians than the US presidency. For the last decade, one man has been at the centre of this storm, Donald J. Trump. When Trump rode that escalator, he wasn't just announcing a campaign. He declared war on a rigged system that exists across Western civilization. You could hear the panic in the elite's voices because he wasn't a puppet. He wasn't controlled opposition. He was a billionaire who couldn't be bought. And he understood the foundations of America and the American people. President Trump understood this concept and demanded a return to the basis of our civilizations. Demos, Greek for the people, Kratos, Greek for power or rule, or the Roman concept of res publica, which established principles of public governance. And the elites hated him for it because it meant accountability for political elites. It meant accountability for political elites worldwide. President Trump's goal, make America great again, which in reality means make Western civilization great again. Unlike most politicians and elites, he actually meant it, and he started out to prove it, which threatened the political establishment's livelihood. This was a threat they weren't going to take lightly. Many normal Americans and Australians question the same thing. Are politicians self-serving, and do they have their people's best interest at heart? Then a leader like President Trump comes along, a leader willing to fix what needs fixing, regardless of how ugly, dirty, or spiteful the requirements might be. Professor Victor Davis Hanson of Stanford and the Hoover Institution illustrates Trump's journey perfectly by referencing old Westerns. I'm going to try and paraphrase Professor Hanson's analogies. The town folk are being traumatised by bullies and are begging for a saviour. A good, forgotten, but hard, rough out-of-towner arrives and saves the town by committing absolute violence and by doing things that others could not do, usually killing the bad guys. The outsider is forced to do what nobody else is willing to do, to achieve the results the town demands. This proves something fundamental. Forced doctrine is real. It's the law of reality, whether we like it or not. But back to the Western analogy. Once the evil is gone and the town returns to normal, the hero is forced out because the townsfolk can't face what the hero had to do, forcing the hero to leave the township forever. President Trump is an illustration of this thought, and you can see it in his slogan, "Drain the Swamp." Yet because the experts and the media class told the world to hate him, most people did. Where's the logic in that? With the benefit of hindsight, we now know every major claim made against President Trump has proven to be incorrect. And that has landed a lethal blow to the credibility of both the expert class and the mainstream media. COVID made this impossible to ignore. The mainstream media and the majority of so-called experts demonstrated gross incompetence And in America especially, that failure gave rise to the era of podcasters. The rise of podcasting, led largely by Joe Rogan and the Joe Rogan Experience, demonstrated something crucial. What mainstream media forgot decades ago, and it has also provided a blueprint for new podcasters to follow. The lesson? Be honest, have conversations, and don't treat your audience like mugs. President Trump has largely predicted the way forward by allowing podcasters to gain media passes into White House press briefings, placing them front and center in some of the most prestigious positions available, indicating that the future belongs to podcasters and not the mainstream media. In the last couple of weeks, 2 people in my own life have approached me with facts about President Trump. One claimed he's not letting fat people into America anymore. That is incorrect. From what I understand, the Trump administration is not going to allow people who are seriously ill and cannot afford their own medical care to permanently immigrate, because Americans can't afford to bring in people who will immediately become a financial burden. That sounds like a smart policy to me. As a fat man, I support it. The second claim I was told was that the Trump administration wants to review social media history, and if they don't like what they see, they won't let you into the United States. Again, a media beat-up. As I understand the policy, yes, there is a proposal to review social media history for people coming from visa waiver countries, which, yes, does include Australia. The purpose is not ideological punishment. It's to prove identity, to assess threat, to identify early warning signals, and to evaluate risk potential. And let's be honest, here in Australia, because of decades of flawed political leadership, we now have radicals among us. We have terrorists walking among us. So why wouldn't a self-respecting country do its due diligence first before welcoming someone into their nation? This should be a policy here in Australia, which brings me to the point I raised with one of these individuals, and it's an important one. For far too long, frivolous propaganda has brainwashed people into thinking they have a right to go wherever they please. The truth is you don't. What President Trump has done is say something very simple. We are the United States of America. My responsibility is to Americans, and the American government will decide who is welcome and who is not. No one has a right to enter another country. You are a guest in any foreign nation, and as a guest, the host has every right to decide when your welcome begins and when it ends. Let me say this clearly. I totally support President Trump's policy. I should not be allowed to enter America as a guest and become a burden on Americans. But as you can see, the media distorts the truth. And if you don't question things, and if you don't do your own research, you can be led around by the nose by seriously bad operatives. Unfortunately, here in Australia, too many people believe everything they're told by Sky News, the ABC, Channel 10, Channel 9, or Channel 7. We must question everything, because in recent history, every one of these outlets has either lied outright or manipulated the truth. That includes newspapers and radio. Here in Australia, the media and the so-called expert class are largely possessed with the same problem I've just described in the US. Our podcasters simply haven't grown to the same popularity yet. But I believe it's only a matter of time. Let's hope so for my sake. Free-to-air news can't continue to hemorrhage viewers the way it currently is, which leaves 2 major players, Sky News and the ABC. They appeal to their rusted-on audiences, no doubt. But for free thinkers, in my opinion, they generally offer very little. You can see that in the arrogance of the ABC leadership. which can be summed up in this next clip.
About what's behind the Joe Rogan effect, how you believe he's managed to so successfully capture this huge market. And then for us here in Australia, you know, how would or should the ABC be going about capturing that kind of audience?
Look, I'm not sure that I'm the right person to respond to that question. I am not a consumer or enthusiast about Mr. Rogan and his work.
Shocking.
I am not one of the 3 billion, and I'm unlikely to be 3 billion and one anytime soon. I think people like Mr. Rogan prey on people's vulnerabilities. They prey on fear. They prey on anxiety. They prey on all of the elements that contribute to uncertainty in society, and they entrepreneur fantasy outcomes and conspiracy outcomes as being a normal part of social narrative. I personally find it deeply repulsive, and to think that someone has such remarkable power in the United States is something that I look at in disbelief. I'm also absolutely in dismay that this can be a source of public entertainment when it's really treating the public as plunder for purposes that are really quite malevolent.
As a former pub manager, I can tell you this: if you ignore serious competitors, you go broke. But I suppose when you're funded by taxpayers, you don't have to worry about competition. And just for the record, if the federal government's watching and wants to pay me millions of dollars a year, I'm confident I could do a better job than the ABC or any of the free-to-air networks. And this failure of leadership doesn't stop at media. It extends to the national strategy. For Australians, the reason America is so crucial to us is simple, and it's strategic. The United States makes up 1 to 2% of our GDP. It is our largest foreign investor. A strong United States directly boosts the Australian economy unless our own politicians sabotage that relationship, which they're doing. The US defence advancements improve our own deterrence capability. And Pine Gap, the joint US-Australian intelligence facility, is absolutely critical to our national security. And I, for one, hope it's filled to the brim with nuclear weapons. Here is a hard truth we can't ignore. If things don't change, and soon, a kinetic conflict with China is coming. And when China decides to make a military move against Australia, our alliance with the United States may be the only hope we have. And I'll say this straight: it does not sit well with me that Australians and Americans could one day be killed by weapons built with our raw materials that our own government sold to the Chinese Communist Party without due consideration. This is treason, in my opinion. Let that sink in. Just over a decade ago, when Donald Trump announced he was running for president, I saw real value in a businessman, not a career politician, leading the free world. In my opinion, career politicians in both the United States and Australia have failed us for decades. And it didn't take long, even during the early primaries, for the globalist elites on both sides of politics to try and crush Trump's campaign. To me, it was obvious. The swamp saw him as a genuine threat, not just to that election, but to the entire system they had built. And they were right. In my personal opinion, some of the most damaging political figures in recent US history include Bush, Obama, Pelosi, Cheney, and Biden. Not because of partisan lines, but because of the policies and decisions that I believe sold out the American people, sold out American workers' sovereignty and national strength. Here in Australia, it's a different system, but the evidence demonstrates the same collective patterns as the US establishment. In 2016, the people struck back. Ordinary Americans were sick and tired of establishment politicians selling out their country and their futures for a couple of dollars. So they flipped the table. The American people delivered one of the biggest upyours to the political class ever seen. To the elites in media, academia, bureaucracy, and politics, the American people said, no more, get stuffed. And it was ironic, wasn't it? If anyone should have embodied the out-of-touch elite, it was Trump, the billionaire with the gold elevators. But he didn't sneer at working people. Most importantly, he recognized that Americans are individuals, not groups. He listened, he fought for them, and they rallied to him by the millions. He understood them. He didn't call them deplorables. He respected them. And then the swamp struck back almost immediately. In fact, according to recent evidence, the strike back began before President Trump was even elected. Investigations, leaks, impeachment attempts, Russiagate, and more. These were coordinated strikes by entrenched interests. Intelligence agencies, the media, political operatives, all determined to undo the people's choice. And let's be clear, using state power to try to depose a duly elected president, or prime minister in our case, isn't just dirty politics. It borders on treason. And any court that claims politicians or national leaders have immunity from treason is, in my opinion, corrupting the very foundations of our political and legal systems, and part of the problem. Trump's policies were rooted in a simple truth that elites refuse to admit. Actions have consequences, and not all civilizations are equal. President Trump's travel bans on 7 Muslim-majority countries wasn't racist. In my view, it was common sense. Islamic terrorism is real, and leadership means acting on reality. The same clarity defined his foreign policy. North Korea was contained. Iran was pressured. China was challenged in the South China Sea, and strength through power earned respect. The Abraham Accords, normalizing relations between Israel and Arab nations, should have been awarded with a Nobel Peace Prize. They were historic. They isolated Iran. They reduced Islamist terrorism. And they made the Middle East safer. And when the Middle East stabilizes, Australians benefit too. When oil prices spike, our cost of living burns with it because of decades of incompetent Australian governments. Trump's presidency also blew the lid on corruption. In my opinion, Biden's laptop, the Russia hoax, and the pandemic response all exposed just how compromised our so-called trusted institutions had become. Trump forced the world to face an uncomfortable truth. If you don't control your energy and your manufacturing, you're a hostage. His first term showed he understood reciprocity, the cornerstone of Western civilization. And this wasn't rhetoric. He pushed NATO allies to finally pay their share. He renegotiated lopsided trade deals. He slashed red tape and taxes, igniting record growth and record low minority unemployment. One of the most disgraceful sagas of Trump's first term was the so-called Russia collusion scandal. It was a fabrication, now proven false. The Steele dossier, paid for by the Clinton campaign. The FBI weaponized against the sitting president. Australian bureaucrats shamefully played a role, lending credibility to the Democrats' hoax. Australians, think about that. Intelligence agencies, media organisations, and political elites, all conspiring to overturn a democratically elected president. That's not oversight. That's a conspiracy involving the world's elites. Now, Ben Shapiro, who I respect, claims the idea that there are operatives working behind the scenes, manipulating the world, is false. I disagree. We saw it during Trump's first term. We saw it again during COVID, and we're seeing it again now in President Trump's second term. That's not speculation. That's reality. And let me be very clear. I don't believe these operatives are the Jews, as some people falsely claim. Some of them are probably Jewish. Some are probably Christian. And some others are probably agnostic. That is not the issue. The issue, in my opinion, is a class of collective elites who are deeply invested in globalist principles. Independent nations that reject globalization are a threat to that system. And the people who benefit from it will defend that system at all costs because it's worth a fortune. I believe it can be reasonably argued that this is not good for Western civilization. If you want a clear example of this, in my opinion, look no further than former Prime Minister John Howard suggested that Kamala Harris should be elected over President Trump.
Got to accept the democratic result.
And he says on this score, Donald Trump should have been disqualified from running again.
I think Donald Trump should have left the field when the umpire's finger went up. In other words, I think his refusal to accept the result of the last election and various attempts to overturn that result were not compatible with democracy.
A clear reference to the January 6 attacks on the Capitol in 2021.
We will never give up. We will never concede.
Mr. Trump was accused of inciting insurrection. John Howard worked alongside US presidents of both political stripes, Republican and Democrat, and though he's predisposed to one side of politics, not this time.
In normal circumstances, I would unhesitatingly favour a Republican victory, but there are reasons that prevent me doing that on this occasion.
John.
Dick Cheney, a former Republican US Vice President under George W. Bush, going further in recent days, endorsing Kamala Harris, saying Trump can never be trusted with power again.
Is that a sentiment that you endorse?
Well, I've stated in that fashion, in the abstract, of course it is.
But he's not endorsing Kamala Harris.
I don't think she's got a very good idea of how to run the American economy. I worry that she might lead an administration that will spend far too much, and some of that expenditure will be irresponsible.
To many liberals, conservatives in name only, and political elites here in Australia, Howard is hailed as one of Australia's greatest prime ministers. In my opinion, he is the worst prime minister Australia has ever had the misfortune to elect, maybe apart from Albanese. And yet, despite relentless attacks, constant investigations, and wall-to-wall media hostility, President Trump did more in 4 years than most presidents manage in 8. And that's even with his own side fighting against him. Then came COVID-19, a perfect storm of panic, propaganda, and power grabs. Governments around the world abandoned reason. Lockdowns crushed small businesses. Free speech was censored under the guise of misinformation. COVID revealed something far more sinister. The institutions we trusted were not telling us the truth, not just in America, but here in Australia and the world over. From health bureaucrats to police, the pandemic showed how quickly public safety can become a tool for political control. The 2020 election wasn't just about ballots. It was about trust. Ballot harvesting, mass mail-in voting, the censorship of the Hunter Biden laptop story, all of it tilted the playing field. Millions of Americans felt the system was rigged, and the media gaslit them for even daring to question it. In my opinion, taking all that into consideration, clear-thinking, reasonable person knows Trump won that 2020 election, but it was stolen by the elites. When historians look back, I believe they'll see Trump's failure to be re-elected in 2020 as a turning point for America, but also the world. A blessing in disguise. It gave President Trump the time and clarity to reflect, to reassess and prepare for the real fight ahead. More importantly, it forced him to build a team, not of career politicians, but of true MAGA supporters. People loyal to the American people and its principles, not just the man. In my view, Trump is laying the groundwork for consecutive terms of MAGA leadership, provided those who follow him put aside self-interest and fully embrace the core principles of MAGA. Fast forward to 2024, the return of the fighter. Despite relentless indictment, smear campaigns, and two assassinations, President Trump re-emerged stronger. This time, ordinary Americans didn't just see President Trump. They saw one of their own, battle-hardened, bloodied, but unbroken. And his supporters, they weren't just voters anymore. They were fighters, men and women who had survived their own battles with the deep state, censorship and cultural persecution. Trump's comeback wasn't just political. It was symbolic. It told America and the world that the people still have power if they refuse to bend. On July 13, 2024, in Butler, Pennsylvania, Donald Trump's life and history changed forever. A simple turn of the head saved him from a sniper's bullet. Trump later said, "God saved me." Now consider the timeline. June 27, Biden melts down on the debate stage. Days later, he arrogantly declares, "If the Lord Almighty told me to step down, I would."
If you can be convinced that you cannot defeat Donald Trump, will you stand down?
It depends if the Lord Almighty comes out and tells me that, I might do that.
Well, I mean, on a more practical level, Washington Post just reported.
July 13, Trump survives the assassination attempt. July 21, Biden bows out of the race. Call it fate, call it providence, call it divine intervention. But no honest person can deny this. History shifted in Butler. I believe people are sometimes spared because they still have a mission to fulfill. Donald Trump was saved for a purpose. And I believe that purpose is to restore greatness to America and re-anchor the Western world in the values that made us strong. Why this matters for Australia? I hold grave concerns for the United Kingdom, and even more so for my own beloved Australia. We are fast becoming a poor imitation of democracy. We can't even run a federal election without trashing the very idea of a representative government. And that is why Trump still matters, even if you hate him. Trump's legacy is bigger than politics. He changed global conversation. He tore the mask off the establishment. He exposed the lies of globalism. He forced the world to confront hard truths long forgotten. Borders matter. Energy independence matters. Family matters. Free speech matters. And merit matters. Like him or not, Trump forces moral clarity. You're either with the people, which is what democracy demands, or you're with the elites who despise them. And that is something very different. Why does this matter to Australians? Because America's fate shapes ours. A strong America deters China. A weak America emboldens them. And let's not sugarcoat it. China is preparing for war. They have already targeted Australia. Cyber attacks, military lasers aimed at our aircraft, infiltration of universities and political institutions, the firing of live ammunition off our coast. They unleashed COVID-19 on the world. That's not a conspiracy. That's reality. And meanwhile, back home, our leaders, both Liberal and Labor, hand over our energy sovereignty, killing off domestic manufacturing and indoctrinating our children with ideology that weakens the very core of what it means to be an Australian. That's not leadership. In my opinion, that's betrayal. As a friend and a supporter of the American people, let me speak directly to Republicans in the United States, and especially to the MAGA movement, with what I hope is taken as respectful advice. President Trump went to the American people with clear goals and measurable outcomes. And based on his record in the first term, he has earned patience and earned flexibility. to see those goals through. President Trump represents a new Republican Party, not the old guard, not the globalists, and not the warmongers, but a movement rooted in principles that reflect the core values of America. So to every Republican in Congress and every donor still clinging to the Bush-Cheney era, if you can't stand behind President Trump's agenda or you want to manipulate that agenda, resign. Do it as a matter of honor. Stop weakening the movement and stop betraying the people. Because if the American people lose faith in the democratic process, history is very clear. Tyrants thrive in chaos, and we cannot afford to go down that path. Not in America, not in Australia, not anywhere the West still draws breath. In Australia, our politicians and former politicians do not speak for the Australian people. Labor won government with just 3 in 10 Australians voting for them. Thanks to the voting system we operate under, the only politician who comes close to understanding the Australian people is Senator Pauline Hanson. Whether it's a friendly American, MAGA loyalist, the Trump administration, or President Trump himself, the Australian people need your help. I understand that we are a sovereign nation, but being the world leader means you have the ability to apply pressure. Other nation, external pressure has historically been one of the few mechanisms that forces accountability. So please, President Trump and the American people, help us here in Australia. This is why Donald Trump matters, even if you hate him. Because when he fights, he's fighting for every free nation that refuses to bow to elite control. If he wins, we all win. Every citizen who still believes in borders, merit, freedom, and the right to tell the global elites to get stuffed. Put simply, President Trump matters because he blew up the old establishment collectivism and let sunlight in, paving the way for ordinary people to demand a return to a system where politicians work for their electorates and not the other way around. This is honest and open conversations, unfiltered, unrestricted, unapologetic. The fight for truth isn't over. It's just getting started. This podcast is mainly viewer supported, so I want to thank you all for your support. To the members, I want to specifically thank you for your financial support. For supporters who aren't members yet, now is the time to join the Honest and Open Conversations podcast, because this movement only gets stronger with every voice that stands with it.